So did you guys all see that wonderful figures and press release that Jim put out? All of my agents that are online, do you guys see that first?
Oh, that was awesome.
Can you believe that? June and July have been our best 2 months ever, and it's through this COVID crisis, which is just absolutely amazing.
Well, I've said it before, people are sitting at home with nothing better to do than shop for houses.
I love it. And we try and make that as easy as possible, don't we?
Yep.
I love it. Jeannie, we just came off of our best 2 months ever, and it was through COVID. June and July are record months for us.
I know. I've never seen anything like it. I tell the new agents they have no idea what the real world is like.
Yeah, and we don't want to go back to that.
Can you hear me, Vicky?
Can
you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good.
Yes.
Yep.
Did you guys
crazy.
Did you guys catch the fact that our company, Century 21 Bradley's sale price was over $200,000 for June and July?
That's unbelievable.
Incredible.
And August is looking like it's going to be the same kind of a month.
Yeah. You know, this is not really meant to be a joke, but you know, you have all these people who always, over the years, when you're looking for houses, you look for one in the school system that your kids are in, but heck, more people are teaching their kids at home now, so I guess that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It will again. We're going to be back.
Well, typically July slows way down because of school, and this year it was different.
Yeah, because I think it just didn't matter. I mean, you know, they're
right.
You know, at home, so it doesn't really matter. But we'll be back to normal soon as far as the world goes, and we'll be cooking along here. But for all of you agents that are online, congratulations, because each and every one of you contributed to the phenomenal that we put out. So thank you all for being part of our company and for making all these wonderful numbers happen. And we appreciate each and every one of you. Get back to my Zoom screen here. So Jeannie, this came about because I had posted on our Facebook page that, you know, I was getting ready to put out the August calendar, and I wanted to know what everybody, you know, was looking for, because sometimes I feel like I'm training classes, and if it doesn't really appeal to anybody, you know, it's not helping anybody. So we spent the last couple months going over purchase agreement, sales agreement, things, or I mean, purchase agreement, listing agreement, and knuckling down on that. And I put out what do you guys want to be happening in some training classes? And one of the subjects that came up was to really learn a little more about how to read a title policy, what as an agent we need to look for, what we're showing our clients. And then moving on into which I still call it, but you know, closing docs and things like that. So I know for those that have been with us for a long time, I don't know if you know, Jeannie comes to agent training, title work, and that with our agents. So I thought it was a good time to just bring her on and get everybody on all that good stuff. So now it's time to get all your and talk about some title policies here.
Okay, well, I can go over the commitment with everybody. I don't know what kind of questions they're having for you, Vicky, if you could let me in on that.
I've got the box. So you guys, Jeannie, they can unmute themselves if they want to speak. Just, you know, people let us know. I've also got the chat box open, so if anybody types a question, I can get there. And I'll just try and monitor this while you're talking and going through the thing.
Okay.
So I'll let you get started.
Well, all right. Well, the commitment that you guys see, we, as a title company, we ensure the legal description always. So you have a property address, but the legal description is what we ensure. And when you see a title commitment come over, the very first page is always going to have our file number on it. And then we're going to, on the second page, you're going to see a Schedule A. And Schedule A is going to have our property address. It's going to have the date of the commitment, and then it's going to have our policies.
Jeannie, do you have one
Yeah.
that you pulled up, because I'm not seeing anything else on a screen? Did you have one that you were sharing a screen?
I didn't have time to get that done yesterday. I'm actually looking at a commitment, but it's got people's names on it. So I'm sorry. It was just short notice and I didn't have time to do it.
I'm so sorry. Okay, so that's following along. I guess I was thinking that we had something to look at here. So we'll just, if you've got an old policy you want to pull out, but yeah, just kind of go through it slowly and what people are looking for. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. So when you get your commitment, you're always Schedule A is going to be your first page, and it's going to have the property address on it and the commitment date, and you're always going to see the issues or the policies that we're going to be issuing. So if you have a lender, there'll be a loan policy, and there's always going to be an owner's policy, which we give to the new buyer. So Schedule A is going to be talking about that, and then on the bottom of Schedule A, you're going to see the legal description. Exhibit A is the legal description. It's going to be the amount, the policy amount, like how much the sales price is and how much we're giving, the lender's giving as a loan. So Schedule A is pretty easy. It's basically going through the front page of you guys' purchase agreement and going over everything and stating it. So when you go to Schedule B on a title commitment, that is our requirements, and that is the things that we have to fix in order to go to a closing table. So any requirements are going to be any kind of mortgages, tax liens, federal tax liens, anything that we have to pay or get rid of before we can go to do a closing and give the buyer a clear policy. Any questions on that one?
So Jeannie, on Schedule A, how often do you see, is it really important? I mean, obviously when we get these things in, I know a lot of times we just get them and, you know, send them straight to our paperless file. Is it something, you know, do we need to double and triple check that legal description and the names that are on there and make sure they're spelled correctly at that point in time?
Well, not really, because, well, hopefully the agents have done that before they ever write up a purchase agreement. They're making sure the address is right, but it's going to be our mistake if we don't follow your purchase agreement. So really Schedule A is just an overview of the purchase agreement that you gave us, basically showing how much the sales price is. And then if we don't know how much the loan policy is yet, we put that in eventually. But that's basically how much they're borrowing. So that could be, we don't even know it right in the beginning, but eventually that's going to be the policy amount that we're going to be giving to the lender when we give them a policy.
So Schedule.
So really you don't have to watch that unless your title company calls you and says, well, we got a problem. What you're saying on the commitment isn't what we're seeing.
Okay.
Or what we're seeing on the purchase agreement is not what we're seeing when we pull those records.
Okay.
So really, you guys don't have to worry about Schedule A. It's really just knowledge of what the commitment is when you see it.
Okay. And then the next page, when you're talking about the requirements, where it lists the mortgages and the tax liens, that's where it comes into play. Maybe, you know, maybe we weren't aware there was a tax lien on the property, or that they still had a couple different mortgages showing up or something like that.
That's correct. And then occasionally we will have something where we have a buyer that has the same kind of a name, and we have to prove that that is not or a seller that has the same name, like John Doe, and it has a different middle initial. So we have to make sure that this isn't our seller. And at that point, if we do have that, sometimes our newer agents tend to panic about that. We just have to make sure it's not the same guy. So we ask for a full social security number, and then we get a hold of that attorney to make sure it's a different person than our guy selling the property. And then at that point, we will draw up something and have the seller sign at closing that says, that's pretty much notarized, that says you are not this person, just to cover ourselves again. So a lot of the stuff on the requirement page is just stuff that we do during a closing, like the sales disclosure and things like that. The things that you guys are always going to want to look at is if your seller says they have one mortgage and you see all kinds of problems on there, that's when you need to get worried. But basically, with Sarah, with our girls at Fidelity, they're going to send you out the title commitment and tell you exactly what you need to be worried about, and what we see. And at that point, Sarah's awesome at title. Well, she's been doing it for 30 years like me. She really knows it. So she'll tell you, hey, this is probably not the same person, but we have to make sure. So basically, she's going to tell you the things that you really do need to worry about in the requirements page.
Hey, Jeannie, this is Jimmo, and I got a quick question on the requirements page, line 5. Just because I've never seen this before. Well, I guess I've never taken a deep dive line by line. What does it mean when it says the final loan policy will be issued without a gap exception?
Well, there's going to be a time between the time that we close and the time we record, and it says that we give an insured closing letter. So if something does happen in between there, then that's going to be our problem because we didn't get it recorded fast enough.
Gotcha.
So in other words, once you go to a closing at Fidelity, and I am sure it's that way everywhere, I hope, you're getting an insured closing letter for your buyer and your seller, which says, we closed this property, but it's not recorded yet. Some states, everything has to be recorded before you can even pass money out. What we're saying is there's going to be a time between the time we do the closing and the time it gets recorded that we are going to make sure that it's our responsibility to get that recorded as soon as possible.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Great question.
Now, if we go to page 3 on the exceptions page, you guys, that's going to be, if we have, let's say you live over in Hacienda Village and there's a creek running through your backyard, we're not going to insure that creek. We don't know how high it's going to get. We're going to list that as an exception on our title work that says, we don't know about that. But basically the exceptions page, you won't see many times. If we don't do a survey, it's going to say we did not do a survey, so we can't be absolutely positive of, like, especially lake properties. Vicky, you know that. If you've ever done, you probably did a survey on yours. Lake properties are really weird. If you don't do a survey, we're searching the same property that was sold to the seller. That's all we know to do. So we're going to list the survey exception and say we did not have a survey on this property, so we're going to do what we're going to search what we know to be the property. So really, we don't see a whole lot of exceptions. If there's railroad tracks or something running through a yard, we're going to have to list that and say we can't guarantee that. If there's something going on, like with they're adding their, let's say they're redoing, when they were redoing Lima Road, we would have to list out in the front of that road that we're not positive how that's going to go yet because they didn't have that all cut and set in stones, but we knew it was happening. We knew the roads were going to be widened. So we would list that as an exception until they know for sure it's out there recorded what's going to be happening with it. Okay. And then also on that page, you're going to see the taxes. That is something that you guys want to look at. Your taxes are going to show if there's a homestead and a mortgage on the property right now, it's going to show that. And then you're going to have to talk to your agents. If there's no homestead exemption on the property right now, I mean, your buyers, you're going to be able to tell your buyer, hey, when you put that homestead exemption on, your taxes are going to go way down. Or if there is a homestead exemption and your guy's buying it and he's not going to be living in it, you're going to have to say your taxes are probably going to almost double. So the homestead and the mortgage exemption is something that I think a good agent looks at and talks with their people about. Vicky, do you agree with that?
Yeah, and hey, backing up just a little bit, somebody had a question on here. When you have an exception, is anything additional to get it?
I'm sorry, you faded out. What?
Going back to what you were talking about with the exceptions, is there anything additional that we can do or that the client can do to get that portion covered?
Not really. It's just basically an exception is going to be something nobody's really sure about. What can happen? Like I said, that creek going through your yard, if it rains for 8 days, it's going to get high. So basically an exception means we can't insure that because it's a risk to insure it.
And
So,
that's, and that's something
Go
that
ahead.
if there's a creek like that, obviously when we get surveys or whatever, may require like flood insurance if it's a creek close to the house, something.
Correct. That is correct. Yes.
So that's where that coverage would, okay.
Yes. I will have to tell you one thing we skipped over and I should have mentioned in the requirements is, let's say that you have a seller that signed something and they're not the seller on it. It's been deeded or it hasn't been. There's going to be a mention that we have to have a deed from so-and-so to so-and-so before we can actually go to a closing on the table. You should always look and make sure that your seller is matching what your purchase agreement says, because some sellers have thought they can sell something that they can't. So always look and make sure that when you get your title work, that your seller matches that front page as far as the person that signed your purchase agreement, because we have to make sure of that before we can give an insured closing letter and go to a closing table.
I think there's one person that doesn't have their phone muted and I can hear like kids crying in the background or something. There we go, that's better. Okay, sorry about that. Go on, Jeannie.
Okay, yeah, so I was just saying you always want to make sure that your seller that signs your purchase agreement is the seller that we show on title, because that's going to show what's happening. And if there's something where there is a deed that needs to happen before we can go to a closing table, it's going to be in our requirements. It's going to say we can't, let's say it's a build job and we've got a builder that's selling something. Well, the land isn't sold yet. So there's going to have to be a warranty deed that goes between the builder, the land, the builder to our new buyer. So the requirements would show something like that. They're going to show if we have a problem with the seller that we have to get another deed before we can actually come to the closing table. And we'll see that with, like I said, new build jobs. Like, let's say we have a Windsor home and they've got the land, but they haven't actually deeded it to Windsor yet. So we have to have a deed going from them to Windsor to the new buyer. And it would show that on our requirements page that we need that.
So Jeannie, this gets back to when we were talking about the purchase agreement, making sure that the name on the purchase agreement is exactly how somebody plans on taking title and how they sign their names legally.
Yes, that is correct. When you have a buyer that signs a purchase agreement, that's how we're going to put them in title to the property. If you have a buyer that's got, and we've been seeing this a lot lately, if you have a buyer who wants to add somebody onto title, once the purchase agreement has been signed, you have to make sure that the lender's okay with that to put them in title. And if they're not, then we have to do a quick claim deed afterwards. And sometimes the lender will say, no, we can't put them on title because maybe they've got credit issues or something that they're just not going to risk with that buyer. So in that situation, we will do a quick claim deed afterwards and put them into title so that they're on title, but they aren't actually on the loan. But however you write that purchase agreement up with that buyer is how that's how our commitment's going to look. And if it doesn't, and let's say we do add somebody on and the lender was all okay with that, we're going to have an addendum at closing that says Bobby to be added to as a buyer, so that the seller signs it, the buyer signs it, and the agents get a copy of it, so that we are all having all of our I's dotted and our T's crossed if we ever have to stand up in a court of law, which is really what our job is, to make sure we're not going to have to stand up in a court of law and not have done something correctly. So basically, if you do add somebody, there's going to be an addendum at closing, and a lot of times we just put it out there and have everybody sign it for the agents. Let's say if the closing date's extended, we've had a lot of that lately with the lenders. Doesn't close on the 12th like it's supposed to. We're going to have something at closing that says closing, or usually the agents do, but if they don't, we'll do it for them. It just says closing date to be extended to 8/14. And then we'll give all parties a copy of that so that it matches up. So in other words, your purchase agreement has to add what we're doing at that closing table.
Makes
Does that make
sense.
sense, everybody? Yep. People get mixed up on that. And then also, just remember, when we do a quitclaim deed after closing, I don't think a lot of people understand title insurance. But if we do it, let's say Vickee buys a place and she decides she wants to get her son on the title on a quitclaim deed afterwards. Our owner's policy is going to be given to Vickee. It says, we know all about you. We're ensuring that there's not a problem on this title work. But once Vickee adds her son, let's say he's got all kinds of credit issues, those are going to attach to that property. Those will attach to the property. So when you're adding someone in quitclaim deed, a lot of times people don't worry about it if it's their kids or something. But that is something that our owner's policy is not going to cover that. If you go to a closing in 7 years and this guy had all kinds of mess on it and put it on the title work, it's not going to be covered through our owner's policy. It's going to be effective for that one buyer that bought the property, for Vickee only in that situation.
Great.
So it's just exactly what it says. A warranty deed warrants that the property is, everything's okay, free and clear. A quitclaim deed is quickly deeding someone onto the property. And then I think after that, we've gotten to our exceptions. And then basically this is just behind that, you guys are always going to see our wire fraud alert. That's a big deal in Fort Wayne. And it just talks about our wire fraud and our privacy notice, which says we have done everything we've done everything to keep everyone's information private. I can't even walk away from my phone for 2 seconds without it shutting down because I can get into that information on my phone, and Fidelity has to make sure that you guys are protected with that. So that's basically the title work in a nutshell.
Hey, Jeannie, can you cover the fact that let's talk about a couple issues that I've seen come up lately. One being maybe a shared driveway situation, or also encroachments on a property.
Okay. They'll be listed as an exception. The shared driveway, we've had situation where we have most of these situations where it's out in the country and it's grandpa sold to the kids and the kids sold to the grandkids and they all been driving all over each other's property forever and they don't think anything of it. And now a new buyer comes in and says, well, I don't want them driving over my property. So we can actually prepare a driveway encroachment or a driveway agreement which says you have responsibility to take care of your part of the driveway. We have to ours, but we're going to list it as an exception. We're not going to say that driveway is going away. We're just going to make sure that the parties are all protected, especially the one whose yard the driveway is in, who's being driven over. So the driveway, the encroachment is going to be listed as an exception. We just had a closing last week where actually the neighborhood association had put a lien on the property because of a fence. He didn't like I think the seller, nobody liked him, but the neighborhood association wouldn't let us close without him taking that fence down. It was a lien on the property. So we actually had to go to the people and say, well, what do you want to do? And the seller had to move that fence because the buyer was insistent upon it. And if they weren't, the association was going to place a huge lien on the property and the seller wouldn't have been able to sign it or sell it. So that was a very unusual situation, but it's happening. It happened. So we see all kinds of stuff. But basically, we're going to list it as an exception on our property and give everybody knowledge of it so that they know what's going on. If you have a fence encroaching on a property and you get a survey done, that new buyer has every right to go next door to the seller after they close and say, move the fence. This is my property. He has that right now. He's got a survey and proof. But it doesn't mean we can't close it. It just means we're going to list it as an exception and make all parties aware of everything.
Another good reason to get a survey when you're representing the buyer to get a survey. I know a lot of people waive that now to get deals put together, but surveys are really a big deal.
Yeah, especially if you're working on out in meets and bounds properties, and it's not as bad if you have a property in Arlington Park or somewhere where they're pretty much square pieces of land, but still, these two situations were that. But if you have meets and bounds and lake properties, I would never, ever suggest not getting a survey. Especially, like I said, Vicky, with lake properties, they don't go straight out in front.
No, they don't.
They don't. They don't go straight out front. So I thought that tree out in front of my lake place was my tree. It's not my tree. It's next door neighbor's tree. The survey showed me that.
Yeah.
Because you would have never known it by the line.
No, and yeah, lake properties are just totally crazy. I know our property line actually looks like it goes across to the center of the road out front. It's just kind of crazy. And every inch of real estate at a lake is valuable.
Every single inch, but and those are expensive surveys to get. So know that right away. They can be $1,000.
Yeah.
But honestly, if I were buying a lake place, I like knowing where my property line is. And I was shocked at how every property line is the same. It's almost like they're actually, if you put your pier out straight out front, it's not straight, it's candy corner. So it's just the way that it actually goes along the shoreline is how they made the properties, I believe, when they first cut them out, but they're not straight out. So, and another one, meets and bounds, farm places, meets and bounds, get a survey. People need, we see more problems with that than anything. And a lot of that is because, like I said, there's grandpas selling to dads and moms that sold to kids, and they just thought they didn't do surveys. That was their piece of property. But a survey will show a lot of stuff that people didn't know about. Many of them, there's never been a survey on that property. So, but yeah, that's about that, I think, Vicky. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to point that out because, again, especially for the newer agents, when you get these, these things, like you said, Jeannie, sometimes, newer agents will kind of panic when they see a bunch of judgments on there, not realizing that if it's a real common name, it's probably, hopefully not your client, but it also is a good, reminder when you're sitting at the listing appointment, to remind the seller. I mean, they have to be honest with what they got because it's going to show up.
Right. And another thing, if you have a seller that talks about a divorce, they're going through a divorce of some kind, always remember that as long as the divorce is pending, we can go to a closing table. We just have to call that day and make sure it's still pending. Once it becomes finalized, it's all different. And then we have to follow that divorce decree. If the property's in a trust, we need the trust paperwork. If it's an LLC, we're going to need operating agreements and all the things that made that company, that formed that company. So if it's not in a person's name, we're going to need extra documentation just to make sure that we've got the right people signing to sell that property.
Good deal.
So if you hear like death, divorce, if you got a seller that's had a wife or a husband that died and they were married until the day that one of them died, then we're just going to prove that. We don't need to see that death certificate. Most of the time we can pull that, and the deed will make reference. It'll say that so-and-so was married to so-and-so until she died or he died on this day, and then the guy's allowed to sell the property. But the deed's going to make reference always to whoever took title to that property in one way, shape, or form. So, and that's how we have to have it signed. If it's in a trust, we have to have that trustee. If the trust says 3 people have to sign, all 3 people have to come. And that's where our underwriting department looks at those documents and says, hey, you're aware that 2 people need to come to this closing? And many, many times the agents are like, no, he told me just 1 person needs to come, because they don't understand it either. They kind of expect us to guide them through in that legal part of it. So.
Great. Anybody else have any other questions on the title policy?
And then remember, with title insurance is what we're giving to you guys to make everything knowledgeable. When you go to a table, what we're handing to your buyer and the lender is an owner's policy and a loan policy. So those are our actual policies. The title insurance is just making everybody aware of what we need to fix before we get there. So with Fidelity, we'll give 20% off on any owner's policy that you have. It's called the owner's policy, the one that was given to the buyer at closing. We're going to give a 20% discount because really the title company, I don't know about all the other ones, but we don't have to search that property any further back than that title policy, because if that company made a mistake, they're the ones that have to fix it. So, and that's why I tell people, we just had one the other day where the title company was out of business. And we had to call the seller and say, you're going to have to figure this out. I mean, you shouldn't have closed with Joe Blow because he was gone. So yeah, it's for real. And the owner's policy, just remember, that's really the policy that we need at Fidelity to give a 20% discount for that new deal for you. From anywhere. It doesn't have to be a Fidelity title owner's policy.
All righty. Anybody have any other questions?
I have a lot of agents that get mixed up and don't understand, and will say, well, do you have the policy? And they send the title work. They don't understand that there's two different things there, that the owner's policy is it's the policy that basically says Fidelity's responsible if Fidelity made a mistake.
Okay, got it.
And you guys should be getting those at closings. Those policies should be, if they're not handed to you at closings, you should have them within a couple weeks from the title company. There's going to be a different policy if you're not going to live in the house than there is if you do live in the house. There's going to be a different policy if you're going to rent the house out or if you're going to just use it as an investment. So those policies do take a little longer than the regular, but you should have those from your title company within a couple weeks, those policies.
Jeannie, I have a question. So if we call and order title work with you, do you guys, when you start plugging this stuff into your system, will it like flag it if you closed on it previously so you already have it? Or would
yes, we will look and make sure we haven't done it, and we'll automatically give discount if it's gone through Fidelity.
Okay, that's what I wanted to, because I figured if it was going through your system, it'd pull it up and then they'll automatically get the discount.
They will automatically get the discount.
Okay. Anybody got any other questions regarding the title policy or what the differences are? And maybe what we can do, Jeannie, since we didn't have, you know, a sample one, maybe we can come up with one where names are whited out and whatever, and maybe like mock it up, like, you know, this would be an exception. I mean, maybe we can just send out some follow-up material.
Yeah, I can see. If I would have had more time, I would have gotten that. I just didn't have the time to prepare it. We've been so busy. I'm sorry. And I just found this out yesterday. So I'm sorry, Vicky. I would have been more organized. But I can definitely look for that and get it out so that you can send it to the agent. Yeah,
no problem. My bad. I did not get a hold of Jeannie last week, and I forgot to call her, and so she was kind enough to jump in at the last minute. So we'll follow up. So my fault, not
okay.
Jeannie.
Yeah, sorry, guys.
Okay, we can.
And then, yeah, that's about all there is to title insurance. Really, you guys, if there's a problem, I'm going to be calling you, or Sarah will be calling you and saying, hey. Or you'll get that follow-up email that says, hey, did you see this? Because we right now in the world we live in, the lenders are what's holding things up because they're so busy. But we have to have all of our ducks in a row so that we're not the reason things are being held up. So we're very, very adamant about making sure that it's not the title company's fault or the real estate agent's fault if something's going wrong at the end.
Good deal.
Which is why when we do a purchase agreement, if you don't have a lender, get us the lender's information as soon as you can. And the sooner they start getting that information, the better it's going to work for everybody.
About how much time do you need on a cash deal?
If it's Allen County, we can close a cash deal probably next week. What I have my people do is we'll get a rush on it and actually schedule it when they're ordering it. I've got one that's with one of your agents right now that I just told him, I said, if you schedule this for next week, we'll have it ready. So when we're not slammed like this, we can do cashes in a couple days. But right now it's just so busy. I hate to say that, and then if there's a problem with title work that we have to clear, that's the only problem is that usually. So I hate to make a promise and then have, you know, you would always say to your people, well, as long as title work looks good and they don't have to clear anything or can get the payoffs, but basically we should be able to close them next week on a cash deal. They're so easy and fun.
Perfect.
We love cash deals.
Yeah, we all do.
They save that headache.
Perfect. Hey, Jeannie, do you want to move on and talk just a little bit about the closing documents and anything pertinent on that?
Yeah, basically, when you guys get your master settlement statement, you're always going to have, the buyer's going to have a CD if they have a lender that matches that. It should be the very same as the CD the buyer was handed. And then the seller is always going to have a CD that we make up, that we actually prepare for the seller to sign. So that master settlement statement is always going to have a CD, unless it's cash deal, a closing disclosure. And your buyers are going to know about those numbers before you send them to them, because the lender's already talked to them about it. But basically the things that you agents always have to look for is to make sure that your commissions are right, that your broker fees are right, and that basically if you have a survey on it or a home warranty or any seller paid closing costs, you're going to make sure that we didn't make a mistake. That's why we send them to you before anybody else sees them. Yeah, basically it's going to be the things you have to worry about on our settlement statement is that, the stuff that you put on your purchase agreement, we're going to make sure, you have to make sure that we've got that on there and that we didn't miss anything.
Is anybody on?
But like I said, if you have a buyer, those lenders should have let them know so much. Like they're by the time they get to my closing table, they're like, oh yeah, I already saw these numbers. They match my CD. So basically, the lender is way up front more than they ever used to be since closing disclosures came along. Have you noticed that, Vickee?
Yeah.
We don't have last changes like we used to. We can't have last changes like we used to, or it doesn't go to a closing table.
Right.
That's why if you call and you want to change something about the buyer the day before, it's not going to happen. If the lender, it'll happen if the lender reapproves it. And if we have a lender that doesn't get back right away, it's a problem. So basically, anything that changes on the buyer side has to be done before the 3 days, or it's going to be something where we either leave it outside of closing, or we have to change the closing date, or we've got a lender right on top of it that can get everything back to us and reapprove it.
Right. You can make changes on the seller side, but not the buyer side if there's a lender involved.
That's correct. Yep. So always remember that. That's not us trying to be difficult. That's us saying, you know what, your lender's the boss. They get to boss us all around.
For sure. Does anybody else have any other questions, or have you had anything come up on a closing thing that you have a question about? You can either unmute yourself or type in the chat box. So Jeannie, if we're waiting for any other questions to come through, just a little bit for those that don't know and don't use the Fidelity app. It's a great tool. It's a simple tool, especially in this state, multiple offers, and especially now that we've got these escalation blocks pulling through, you can plug all your offers in and lay them all your seller to show what the bottom line is, and all those issues. So for those that are not aware, there's a Fidelity app you use either on your computer or on your whatever. So Jeannie, you want to just highlight that real quick?
Yeah, our Fidelity app is called Fidelity Agent ONE. You just download it from your app store, and if you want to, I can always do a teach and train with you guys. In fact, Vickee, every once in a while we come in and do that. We haven't done it for a while, but it's the best app in Fort Wayne, without a doubt. It prorates taxes. So in other words, your seller kind of knows about taxes, which nobody understands taxes and arrears in Indiana. But basically, it does that, and it's got all of our title fees in it. You'd pick Northeastern Indiana if you wanted to. That would be our area. And then you pick me as a rep, or Crystal. Crystal wasn't able to get on today. If you guys are working with her, you'd pick her as your rep. And then we can do a teach and train with you. But it's easy. Vickee will tell you it's easy. So it's the best app, and it makes you guys look so good. You can do a seller net sheet in about 3 minutes, and it makes you look like you spent a lot of time on it.
Right. And the key to this, guys, you know what we were talking about, the seller's net sheet is obviously it's the most important thing, because, you know, that's what the sellers want to know. Once they get an offer, they look at the offer and they look at you and they go, what am I going to walk away with? They want to know what check in hand, or what amount is getting wired to their next closing. They want to know that fee. They want to know that bottom figure. And especially with these escalation clauses, because as we know, the escalation clause is based on the actual net dollar to the seller. So when you use this app, you can actually, if you get 3 offers, you plug the first offer in, you go to the offer, you put the fees and all the other taxes were prorated. Did those people ask for cost? Did they ask for a home warranty or survey or anything? And then you take offer 2 and you plug that in. Take offer 3 and you plug that in, and then you lay them all out, and it shows exactly the net dollar to the seller. And then you can look at the escalation clauses and say, okay, and we all know it's not just the dollar, it's not just the sale price, the escalation clauses. I get this all the time. People are all up in arms about, you know, a deal going together, and they said, we offered more on this property and they took a different. You know, I had one of those. We got a really high offer, and I knew it wasn't going to appraise for that anyway. We were just trying to get the offer, and I knew it wasn't going to appraise for that. And then the next offer that came in was cash. So even though the other offer was higher, the other one made much more sense for our buyer because it was a cash deal. So everybody all up in arms, you know, accepted or closing underneath, you know, an offer that you have to understand. There's a lot more terms to the purchase agreement than just the price. But the app helps work through everything with those escalation clauses and knowing what that bottom line net is to your seller. Is anybody on here, either in the chat box or unmute yourself? Let me know if you do not know about this app. I just kind of want to see a show of hands who used it and doesn't know about it. Looks like everybody's pretty aware of it. Has anybody?
Pretty popular.
Yeah. Has anybody felt like this has really helped them when they've had multiple offer situations? I love it for multiple offers because it just spells everything out really easily for the seller. The other thing that it does, if you've got, you know, a seller, we're not in this right now because, you know, houses are flying off the shelf, but, you know, it's got some marketing features and some other things like. So yeah, I encourage you, if you haven't used the app, you know, connect with me and try and get that on your phone, especially with this hot market we're in. It'll make you look like a hero when you're standing there talking to your seller, and show them right in a matter of minutes what their net is going to be after that closing. If they take that deal. Now you do have to know, you got to know what their payoff is. You know, there's some things you got to get from your seller. You got to know what their payoff is, and, you know, a targeted closing date, and then current interest rate is, helps figure that accurately. Somebody bought a home many years ago and haven't refinanced. That's kind of, but they're going to have a lot higher interest rate probably. And, you know, so if you know what their mortgage balance is and then your closing date, you get a pretty darn accurate estimate there to give the seller.
Yes, it's pretty accurate. And you guys have to remember, though, we always have to collect that interest. The interest gets collected at the end when we order a payoff. So if your seller's looking at their statement and they're saying, well, I owe $85,000 on it, you always want to tell them the title company is going to be ordering your payoff right before closing, because interest is collected after, when we get those payoffs. So it's always more than the seller thinks. So I would tell them that right up front. Just say, yeah, I know that's your payoff, but once the title company you know, once they collect your payoff, that's the amount we're gonna have to use in writing.
Right.
That way,
And
that way they know up front.
Yeah. And I've done that before too. You know, sellers a lot of times are like, oh, you know, hey, I only owe, like she said, 85,000. And, you know, in their head, that's what they owe. And you get the payoff and it's more like, you know, 98,000 or something.
Yeah,
And they're looking at
Yeah.
you going, quoted me, you know, you have the right net. And then you can show them right there, look, you told me your payoff was 85 and it's not. So, you know, I always wanted
Mhm.
that to them as well.
Yeah, that protects you guys so you don't have to hear about the $800 difference at the end.
Yeah.
Because usually it really is. I mean, when they collect that interest, it's usually about 600 more than the sellers think it's going to be.
Yep.
So remember that, because if you put that payoff in there and they want those numbers back, then they're disappointed at you because you didn't give them the right number, even though it's their payoff.
Yeah.
You can't win. Full disclosure in this business, right, Vicky?
The realtor is always to blame.
Yeah, the realtor, the title company, or the lender.
Yeah.
You know, we all get it.
So anybody, if anybody else has any other questions, we can take those real quick. If you want a refresher on the Fidelity app, you know, reach out to Jeannie, and I'm sure she'll set something up. I know with our Zoom meetings, and we're not doing it on trainings, it's hard to do the hands-on type of training classes, but hopefully we'll get there again someday and be able to meet face-to-face and go through things in detail.
Yep, I'm looking forward to it. I miss all you guys. I miss seeing everybody.
I miss doing live classes.
I know.
Awesome.
All right,
Anybody-
guys. Well, if you have any questions at all, you can reach out to me. Vicky, do they have my information? Should I just give it to them, or?
Yeah, you can give it to them real quick, and then I'll do a follow-up.
Okay. So my cell phone number is 260-705-4959. And my email address is Jeannie, Jeanne, .Slain, and that's SLAIN, @FNF.com. And that's like Frank, Nancy, Frank. And I'll answer your calls. If I don't get right back with you, I'm with somebody and I'll call you back as soon as I can. So just leave me a message and I'll hopefully have an answer before I even call you back if you've left a message.
Awesome.
Okay?
All right. Well, thanks
everybody. Thank you. Sorry this wasn't more organized, Vicky.
No,
I
it's my
just didn't
fault.
have time to do it.
It's my fault. It's my fault. So I'll take the blame for that. No worries. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye, Vicky.